They didn't walk away because they stopped caring. They walked away because they thought you'd always stay. You were never too much. They were just too little to handle real love. You kept showing up for someone who kept disappearing. That's not loyalty. That's emotional damage. They didn't fall out of love. They just stopped pretending they cared. You weren't hard to love. You were just easy to take for granted. You stayed quiet to avoid arguments, but silence ended up breaking you more than words ever could. Some people don't miss you. They miss the way you made them feel about themselves. They never apologized, but you still forgave them. That's love, but it's also why you lost yourself. You begged for effort while they gave excuses. Now they beg for another chance while you stay silent. You became distant, not because you stopped caring, but because you realized they never did. They called you cold, but forgot who made you build the walls. You were never difficult. You were just no longer easy to manipulate. You gave them the softest parts of you, and they used them to hurt you the deepest. They knew what you needed. They just didn't care enough to give it. You loved them in their worst, but they left you when you needed love the most. You asked for effort, not perfection, but they still treated it like a burden. You didn't change. You just stopped bending until it broke you. You stayed when they were hard to love. Now they're confused why you're hard to reach. They noticed your silence too late, because by then, your heart had already moved on. You weren't looking for attention. You were begging to be seen. You carried the whole relationship, but they still said you weren't enough. They loved the way you loved them, but never learned how to love you back. You forgave them over and over until forgiveness turned into self-betrayal. They only reached out when they needed something, not because they missed you, but because they missed your help. You were always there for them, but when it was your turn to fall, no one caught you. You gave second chances to people who didn't even care the first time. That's why your heart stayed tired. They didn't ghost you. They slowly taught you how to stop expecting anything. You loved loud, but they responded with silence. That's what killed you slowly. They blamed you for walking away, but never mentioned how many times they pushed you there. You gave your best to someone who wasn't even giving you half, and you still felt guilty for asking for more. You deserved love that didn't need reminders, not someone who forgot you every time they felt fine. You made them a priority while they made you an option. They knew your heart was fragile, and they still handled it with careless hands. You begged them to care, but care never needs to be begged for. They got used to your effort, so when you stopped, they called you selfish. You were loyal to someone who made you feel replaceable, and they still ask why you changed. They made you feel like you were too emotional, but you were just reacting to not being loved properly. You were patient with their chaos, but they had no room for your healing. They didn't ruin you. They revealed how deeply you can still feel, even after breaking. You kept choosing them, even when they left you no reason to. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the version of them that never existed. They never said goodbye, but you felt it in every delayed reply and missing call. You thought it was love, but it was just you doing all the work. You made them feel safe, but they made you feel unsure. They didn't love you quietly. They loved you when it was convenient. You watched them become a stranger while still remembering everything you once shared. They liked the idea of you, but not the reality of loving you right. You were the peace they never appreciated. Now they live with chaos and call it freedom. They said forever, but meant for now, and you're still healing from the difference. You stopped reaching out, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally loved yourself too. You were the only one fighting for something they didn't mind losing. They said they cared, but love isn't something you have to keep asking for. You didn't lose them. They lost someone who would have done anything to stay. They kept leaving, and you kept welcoming them back. That's not love, that's punishment. You were loyal to a fault, and they were careless without guilt. They never made space for your feelings, only for their needs. You stayed soft in a world that kept trying to harden you, and that's rare. You didn't become cold, you became aware. They treated your kindness like weakness until they needed it again. You wanted consistency, but they kept offering chaos. They never showed up for you the way you showed up for them, and still, you stayed. You weren't asking for too much, you were asking the wrong person. They weren't afraid to lose you because they thought you'd never leave. You gave them peace while they gave you confusion. They made you feel hard to love, but they were just lazy with your heart. You poured into people who never thought to pour back. You kept holding on to someone who was already letting go. They treated your effort like it was expected. Now your absence feels like punishment. You lowered your standards just to keep them around, and they still left. They didn't love you, they loved what you made easy for them. They taught you how to love harder, but also how to protect yourself better. You stayed because your heart was genuine. They left because theirs wasn't ready. You kept being the bigger person, but it just made them smaller in your story. They saw your value the moment you stopped giving discounts. You didn't walk away to hurt them, you walked away to finally choose you. They thought you'd always be there, until you weren't. They confused your patience with permission. You weren't hard to understand, you just needed someone who actually tried. You broke your own heart trying to fix theirs. They won't say it out loud, but they miss the love you gave for free.